went and saw Ballerina last week. I enjoyed it quite a bit, but the movie, unfortunately, did not do the numbers that it needed to justify making such a film. You could make the argument that since it's a Lionsgate property and that the rights have already been licensed out to other streamers and services, it's made its money back, it's going to be fine. But it doesn't speak to on behalf of the fact that the female action genre as a whole isn't doing the numbers that Hollywood thinks it will, judging by how many of these movies they try to make on a regular basis, which is what I find the funniest about it. The movie opened to just $25 million here on a budget of $90 million because of reshoots. And it got me to thinking, look, there's a couple of articles here from Cosmic Book News, both of which kind of jump all over about what the idea for these movies is, why they work sometimes and why they don't work other times. But more importantly, I think that the central theme that they kind of coalesce around in these articles is that the female action genre, the female spy genre, isn't allowed to be sexy anymore. It has to be toned down, and you're not in the movie.
Does that apply to Ana de Armas?
Yes. So in that movie, there's exactly one scene, her very first mission, where she goes to a nightclub and she's dressed in nightclub attire. But in general, she spends the majority of that movie dressed like John Wick. Which I believe was an intentional choice. She wears the pantsuit and the jacket, all black with the matted black hair, which works for the role. And as I gave a very thorough review, I liked the movie a lot, but I did see a couple of critiques, which was just that they don't lean into the tropes that actually make a female assassin interesting. The concept being like women would approach this type of thing differently than men.
Yeah.
And I think if
CIA
we're talking
agents know that.
Yeah, I think if we were speaking purely from an audience demographic perspective, women will show up for men being action stars and men will show up for men being action stars. Women may show up for females being action stars if they actually leaned into aspects that spoke to what it means to be a female rather than simply making them a female version of a male character, meaning brute force and martial arts and guns. They leaned into the sexuality, for instance, of Scarlett Johansson very heavily in Iron Man 2 when they introduced the Black Widow character. And, of course, the character became more developed as time went on. But I think of it as like beauty, the concept of achieving a goal through persuasion and proximity and the ability to surprise people who may underestimate you, which have been completely lost in the genre.
That's interesting because in real life, not just in movies, men benefit from having their abilities and their intelligence overestimated, whereas women benefit from having their intelligence and their abilities underestimated by the people around them. So it should be reflected in storytelling.
Also, it feels like when they lean into these genres, they're too serious. Like when I think of Tomb Raider in 2001 with Angelina Jolie, there is a sense of earnest fun in that character, and that is something that feels devoid.
Is there humor?
There's humor. There's a lot of humor.
John Wick isn't really in the franchise for that.
No, not John Wick. But like if we're talking about Florence Pugh in New Avengers, or we're talking any of these movies, I've got a whole list here of the movies that have come out in the last couple of years.
Florence Pugh's character in the MCU is humorously non-humorous, right? She's comically serious.
Again, they did
Isn't that the point?
Yeah, they did that in Person of Interest with the Shaw character, where the whole point is that she has antisocial personality disorder, and so the world happens around her, and she's completely dull to it all, which worked. But then even those writers, as it got into the later seasons, started making her more humorous, and it connected audiences with it. That was kind of what sparked me wanting to do this, was characterization wise, if a character breaks from who they originally are, most of the time that's very, very annoying. But hypocritically, if it turns the character into somebody you kind of like more, then it tends to not be as much of a problem. At least for me, it's not. But just here's a list of the movies just in the last couple of years. The 355, which was about the three assassins. I don't even remember the actress's name, but they were fairly big. Furiosa, and these aren't just assassins.
Awful.
That was another one, right? The Marvels, Captain Marvel, Wonder Woman 1984, She-Hulk, Birds of Prey, The Woman King, G20, Heart of Stone, The Old Guard, Damsel, Charlie's Angels, the crappy remake, Madam Web, Atomic Blonde, Prey, Peppermint, Ocean's 8, Tomb Raider 2018, Ghost in the Shell, Alita, The Mother. That's the one that I like.
The Jennifer Lopez.
The Jennifer Lopez one.
Wait, Heart of Stone was also.
That was Gal Gadot.
That was Gal Gadot.
And that was so bad I
yeah.
turned it off after like an hour.
Yeah.
And that's me, who tends to give Gal Gadot the benefit of the doubt and find her to be pretty charismatic and she can keep you on screen. But no, turned it off after like a half an hour. Anna, Kate, Hannah, Red Sparrow, Peppermint. That's just the ones off the top of my head that I could think of. I give Atomic Blonde, Prey, Peppermint, Ocean's 8, Alita, and one half of the Marvels movies, meaning Captain Marvel, and one half of the Wonder Woman movies, meaning the original, as being borderline successes, though I would even put an asterisk around Captain Marvel because they purposely wedged it in between Endgame and Infinity War to make you have to go to the movie.
Wasn't Prey a streaming movie?
I'm saying
sucked,
six.
in my
I'm
opinion.
judging this based on the critical response that I saw and others on box office success. Alita was very well liked. Prey was very well liked, but me and you didn't like it. But a lot of people, even in the space, liked that movie quite a bit. I liked Ballerina quite a bit. I thought about Argyle. I liked Argyle, at least the first half, quite a bit.
loved Argyle.
But even that, which was the point that I was making when we talked about it, was that I liked it when she wasn't the girl boss character.
Okay, but I remember us disagreeing on this when we did our review of Argyle because I appreciated both sides of her. And there was at least an explanation for her personality shift.
No,
when she remembers her past life as a spy and reconnects with her old identity.
It makes perfect sense in story. I just didn't like it, and that's just
like
my
if
own
she
bias.
were like the latter half character the entire time, then I would have found it boring. But it was a character arc, and I appreciated that. They wove it into the story well.
So think of those movies that I mentioned from I think Peppermint was 2018. So think about back to 2018. Now listen to some of these. Lucy, Salt, Haywire, Columbiana, the Underworld franchise, Resident Evil, Tomb Raider the original, Wanted, Hunger Games, Ultraviolet, Aeon Flux, Nikita the TV series. There's some bad ones in there, mainly Aeon Flux and Ultraviolet. But in general, that was done at a time where it was more subversive to put women in those roles. And of course, as we know, Jennifer Lawrence was the very first female action star of all time.
Yes, she actually invented that.
She did. She invented that franchise.
Well, I remember Katniss Everdeen getting some criticism for being too flat,
A little bit.
too stoic in the movies.
Which, look, it
But that is
fits.
also part of the
It
book,
fits.
is that she has a stoic presence.
So both Thunderbolts and Ballerina skewed heavily male, meaning 65% of Ballerina, or I'm sorry, 65% of Thunderbolts and 63% of Ballerina skewed male. So men
Yes.
are overwhelmingly the ones
Well,
going to these movies.
I also brought this up the other day off air that I think men are just more interested in seeing movies in theaters than women. If you're going to have a list of movies most successful with women, there are going to be a lot more streaming movies.
Yeah, so I have my list. I was like, I asked you even right before we went live. I said, what are some movies that you can think of that are geared specifically towards women? And Barbie would be a very good example.
Yes.
Wicked, It Ends With Us, and Anyone But You. So It Ends With Us and Anyone But You. I'd also put Another Simple Favor, or what was the one with?
Oh, well, yeah, the Simple Favor movies were streaming movies.
That's Lionsgate as well, so that one's paid off. But Barbie, very, very successful because it leaned into the things that women like. Wicked, very successful. I would assume that that's mostly theater kids,
Yeah.
the girls and the gays.
Yes.
And you know your market and you go to it. What is it about action movies that is so difficult for them to want to lean into in a way? Oh, at the very least, I shouldn't say that because, look, for as long as these lists are, there's an even longer list of movies about men in these genres that do less well as well.
in action.
In
you
action
mean,
movies.
yeah.
Look, there's just as many. But my question is purely on the on the level of risk. why risk it when it seems to split your demographics and the women don't want to show up for it? I was thinking of Citadel on streaming, which was one of the worst shows ever. That's a split between Richard Madden and Priyanka Chopra. And theoretically, I always imagine that, or the Mr. and Mrs. Smith remake that they did, which, right?
That was a TV series.
That was a TV series, yes. Yeah. Well, so it was Citadel. Like, then you think back of a show like Chuck, which was unapologetically willing to placate to the male gaze, as they call it, in just about every way,
G-A-Z-E,
and leaned into the sexuality, the perceived sexuality of the female main character, who would often use it to kind of trick men and get where she needed to go, because being a beautiful woman opens doors. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's where the disconnect is that. When you think about these characters, there needs to be some type of tangible reality to latch onto for it to have mass appeal. Now, I can go see Ballerina and watch her take a level of punishment that no human being could ever take, ever, and be okay with it, because John Wick takes a level of punishment that no human being can take, ever. He fell off the top of a building and he survived. But I can watch that and I can dissociate, because there's no snarkiness, which is also a hallmark a lot of the times. Maybe not with the revenge movies, but with the action movies, definitely and I didn't even get into the Marvels, Miss Marvel, Agatha, She-Hulk, Echo.
Yeah, we don't even need to.
So there's a way to fix this, and I think that the way to fix this is you don't just do the revenge movies, which do tend to be dour, but you return to the traditional action movies. And unfortunately, you're going to have to cast Sydney Sweeney in all of them, because she seems to be the only one that is willing to act in earnest in these movies.
Well, but look at Madam Web, right?
She wasn't the lead of that, and
Yeah, but she was a draw for the box office of Madam Web, which was unequivocally a flop.
Yep.
Even though we loved it.
Even though I loved it.
For our own reasons.
Look, or even the Nikita TV series, which half the show is Maggie Q putting on a small dress and then tricking some buffoon who's like the head of state for a foreign country.
Is that a female power fantasy?
I think it's still the male power. It is. I guess it is the.
Well, that would be a male disempowerment.
It would be the male fantasy plane.
We have a 20 from Shane H. Wilder. The female spy genre only works if they're a femme fatale. People want to see the Mata Hari character who succeeds off of her beauty and feminine wiles. The character doesn't succeed off of brute strength, but through cunning.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes, 100%.
So then I just think they need to give up on trying to make women like action movies, because they don't, and they never will. It's not how our brains are wired.
They're never going to like it as much as they wish that they would. Now, the best thing that you can hope for is to make one that the guy will drag his girlfriend or wife or fiance along with him to the movie. And the sad fact of the matter is that's still the male character, because if you look at James Bond, the men want to be just like him and the women want to be with him. That's the whole point. And it's a denial of biology and a denial of reality to keep trying to do it in another way. The article goes on to talk about like what is even like what is fueling this? Is it DEI? Is it ideology? I watched a Film Threat clip yesterday of them from some live stream with this like interview from the 80s of this guy the dude from Hanna-Barbera pitching stuff, and like female executives telling him all the things that were wrong with it. And this was back in 1985. So the Marxist social engineering has been going on for a very long time in Hollywood, long before many people noticed it in their movies and television shows. But if you go back to, just do Mad Max. You don't need to do the female spinoff. For instance, James Bond, they were going to do a spin-off about Jinx, the character that Halle Berry, not Bailey, played in the, not Tomorrow Never Dies, Die Another Day. They didn't do it because back then they probably were smart enough to understand that it just didn't have the market for it. And that's on a franchise where James Bond is the one that sells it. And that's with Halle Berry, who was at that time a very big star. I didn't even put Catwoman, the 2004 Catwoman, on this list. There's an endless list of them for all of these things. But you know what audiences did skew female? The original Aquaman movie. with Jason Momoa.
Was it really just because they wanted to see Jason Momoa shirtless that bad? Like, you can literally Google that.
It's literally that easy.
It's crazy.
It's literally that easy.
I don't get it.
So, make of that what you will. Ballerina didn't make the money it needed to survive at the box office. I do think it's the rise of the sexless action star in Hollywood. I do think it's the Florence Pughs and the Brie Larsons and the lack of an Angelina Jolie. Even Angelina Jolie, who led a Marvel movie, put on a clinic in that film for as bad as it was, showing you what actual charisma looks like on screen.
They're talking about the death of the killer babe trope in this article.
Salt. That's with Angelina Jolie.
And Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow in Iron Man 2. But then contrasting that with Florence Pugh in the new Avengers or Thunderbolts, whatever you want to call it.
They're always so dour. They're depressed.
Yeah, they said she's depressed. There's no TNA. And her character comes off boring, dull, and gray. There's no sex appeal. And she even talked about in an interview promoting the new Avengers how the movie tackles depression.
I don't go to movies to tackle depression. In fact, there should be a law decree I think you should make David Zaslav the head of Hollywood, and a law decrees that says only streaming services can talk about depression. Movies have to talk about shit that's fun.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I want.
I don't think anyone is going to see a Marvel movie to learn about mental health.
Yeah, there's it's kind of the same discussion if I was to tie it back into something you might be more interested in, which is what is it that makes Sydney Sweeney appeal to men and what's her name appeal to
Sabrina
women?
Carpenter appealing to women.
Yeah.
Well, that Sabrina Carpenter, first of all, is a musician, so.
But she sexualizes herself.
Yes. Well, but she makes music that's essentially about the female experience. So that's why I think she has more of a female audience than Sydney Sweeney.
If you want the female power fantasy to bring the women to the movies, ironically enough, you're going to have to appeal to the male gaze because women like men.
Facts.
Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.